Like, don't point at strangers and behave yourself in public. But TERFs haven't worked that out yet, have they?
Exactly, and I think it's very juvenile, because it's like, well, and so I mean, anyone's welcome to come and look at the feed, my social media feed. But the attacks that I've been getting based on my looks, it's like it's all rooted in their own personal biases, and it's not a reflection on me as myself. It's like, I'm comfortable in my own skin. This is something which I've existed with and lived with and having to come to terms with for the last 5 years.
Hi. Hiya, Rachel. Well, thanks for doing this. I've been following you on Twitter for a couple of weeks, and I think I've probably seen you around, but didn't know it was you. But I noticed you getting some serious pile-ons in recent weeks, and obviously there's been a few media stories about you. So I just wanted a little bit of background, really, because I'm not a sport. I don't follow sports. The only time you hear about trans women in sports is, unfortunately, when it comes through the angle of the Daily Mail. So how long had you been? I know you're part of Nottingham University. Is that right?
Yes. So my personal background: I am 42, just about to turn 43 2 weeks' time. And I transitioned when I was 17. I went to university at the University of Central Lancashire in 2000, and due to a chronic ear condition, I can't play outfield sports. So I was looking for a sport which I could play, and the only one I found was being able to be a hockey goalkeeper.
Right.
So I've always played women's hockey. I have always been a goalkeeper, always been padded up. So at UCLan, I was there for 3 years, played for 3 years, then due to life just getting in the way, dropped out the sport, and then I went back to university in 2016, picked the sport up again in 2017, and I played for Nottingham Trent, and then 2 local clubs before my PhD started in 2020 at the University of Nottingham. I've played 1 season at Nottingham, and all of the news stories have picked up on the social media posts at University of Nottingham.
If you don't mind me butting in, what's your PhD in? Sorry.
I am doing a law and computer science PhD.
Wow, right, okay.
A heavy dose of philosophy.
Because I thought I had read something about you doing gender studies, or did I read that wrong? Because something to do with sociology. That's what I've briefly read.
So basically, across the PhD, I've looked at various bits and pieces. One of the things I've tried to break down is the crime statistics on trans women. Right. Because there is some very pernicious reasoning about trans female criminality, especially framing of across social media of trans women being sexual predators. So about 3 years ago, I went digging into the data just to look at what the data was and how those narratives have come about. And basically the UK crime data is a mess because you can't tease anything out.
People like to weaponize data, don't they? That's a very old trick that people use.
Yes. Yeah, and I think this is a problem when we start throwing things at social media, especially the gender critics, is they will pull down a number and start saying stuff like, 95% of abuse happens through men, and yet every time you say to them, where's the proof about trans women, it's like they can't find it. They just
I always say this, it's a kind of witch finder's trick, because they'll say, well, if we can see you, we are what you say you are, and when you try and make a case for your own identity, they deny it. So it's it's like the phrase "what is a woman" is basically "are you a witch?" Because nothing can pacify the hunter. Nothing's going to pacify the person asking that question, because there's no rounded answer to that question. That's why they use it a lot in politics, and they think it's a gotcha moment for a politician, because there's no obvious. They know that they'd have to go down a misogynistic route to answer that question. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is where you end up, and especially when it comes to sport and social media in general, is the first lesson you learn, I've learned very quickly, is if you want to throw red meat, do it very carefully. Don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. Do the old lawyer trick is, if you don't know the answer to something, look it up first, then ask the other person.
You should always have the answer to the question you're asking.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, like I said, I've been following you. I've noticed. I mean, they are very pernicious once they get hold of a story. The online trolls. I mean, there seems to be several layers of it. There's like the political turfs that will, you know, they think they have some kind of media respectability, but most of the hate is coming from people they've emboldened. You know,
absolutely. I think, you see this. Funny enough, it's like J.K. Rowling posted today about 2 trans female fencers.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with that story. Yeah.
Yeah, and they are competing this weekend in the US, and basically she's went, oh, this is typical, look at these trans women, they're just men competing in sport, and I just went underneath as they're just 2 women competing in sport they love, and literally my inbox on X is just, every time I refresh it, I've got 20 plus replies from gender critics going, just attacking me, attacking them, and just stockpiling.
You see, for me, when I think a lot of people who don't understand the argument can say, oh yeah, we need to keep sports fair and we need to keep sports, you know, parity and stuff, but they don't actually look at the details, do they? Like I was do you know Kirsty Miller? Kirsty Miller's got some brilliant research on this, but they don't want to actually, like, there are certain people that are using science as a kind of weapon. I mean, Emma Hilton is one of them, John Pike. People that are working for Sex Matters, they seem to be very, you know, they seem to have sold themselves out as scientists, or if they were ever a biologist, I don't know what the credentials were exactly, but it seems to be that they are willing to distort data to support an already pre-existing argument. You know, the motivation seems to exclude trans women. That's what they want to do, so they'll reverse engineer an argument to support that rather than the other way around. It's not, you know.
Absolutely. I think you see this. Me and Emma have crossed paths more than once.
Well, she's blocked me.
I mean, they tend to do this. Helen Joyce blocked me. You see it with all the gender critics. I've had it this week with people like Sal Grover blocked me this week, and Helen picked up on my news story from the Daily Mail and basically went off on one at me. And I was like, because I can't respond to it, it's led to a whole range of responses that have been laid out at me, all of which have been framed through this very narrow lens of biological purity. This Puritanism.
Yeah, it is Puritanism. It is a kind of biological essentialism, and but what strikes me is the level of personal attack that somebody can. It's like I said, it's about the witch hunt. It's about pushing you out of the thing you enjoy. Like, because I'm sure a lot of people, like even people who are not trans who've been allies. I know there's some women who've stood up for trans rights and thought, I can't be dealing with this. The level of pile-on is so intense that I'm going to retreat. And that's how they operate. They want, you know, if somebody's got a voice, if somebody's got a voice in the media, if somebody's got something to say that goes against them. Good example was John Oliver recently. They just cannot stand that light getting in, so they will fight tooth and nail to suppress it and link somebody with misogyny, use the word woman as a weapon. You know, like, it's like, you're not standing for women, you don't know anything about women's rights. Well, it's got nothing to do with women's rights. You're not interested in that, because if you were, you'd be looking at statistics about why girls are not achieving in sport. You know?
Exactly. I think you look at John Oliver, who's always stood up for what is fair. He can be very sarcastic at times, but he's also like the best political comedian.
He's a great comedian.
He's very insightful. He's like Charlie Chaplin with The Great Dictator. Him and Charlie Chaplin share a lot in common, and it's like, you look at what John Oliver said, and he's using humour to show the absurdity of the situation.
Well, I mean, that's the job of satire, isn't it? Because people with power and people who want to control narratives can't use satire, because generally speaking, their views are dependent on a groupthink. So
yeah, precisely.
And that's exactly what ironically, that's what they accuse us of, because they'll say, "Oh, it's so Orwellian." It's like, have you actually read a word of Orwell? You know.
Yeah, Animal Farm is probably the greatest send-up of gender critics under the sun. It's like, you look at it and it's I found it. I wrote a piece on Julie Bindel this week.
Oh gosh.
Where it was fun. It was basically me deconstructing her completely. It's like I
noticed she had posted that. She did post it. But interestingly, Julie Bindel was on Piers Morgan, I think it was last night, and she came in contact with full American MAGA misogyny, because the guy, I can't remember the guy she was being interviewed with, but he was saying, keep eating your donuts, fat grandma. At Julie Bindel, I said, this is exactly the people that you kowtow to in the media. These are what come back to bite you, because they don't care about feminism, and if they did, you wouldn't be supported by people like the Heritage Foundation. It's as simple as that.
Exactly, and this is what Bindel said in January in support of Trump. She basically came out on the 21st of January when he got inaugurated, said the left need to take lessons from him, namely you've got to be transphobic and you've got to attack trans people. And it was so telling that when Trump put his executive order out this week attacking trans rights, she was silent on it, because that executive order explicitly said that kids need a mother and a father, and it was like, okay, where are all the gender critics now? Well,
Julie Bindel's blocked me because they don't like me because I turn up at their events and I don't protest. I buy tickets for them and I sit and wait my turn to ask a question. I've done this a couple of times. So I booked to go to Julie Bindel's book launch. It's the one about lesbians, where are we now? I was taking a lesbian friend with me. I thought, let's go and ask a question. Anyway, within 2 seconds of me booking it, I got a notification saying it had been declined. And it said I was not welcome in the reason. It's
ridiculous, isn't it?
I mean,
they're so thin-skinned.
I mean, come on. I was brave enough to go and sit with Helen Joyce at the Institute of Economic Affairs, for crying out loud. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't catch them doing that. If I invited them to an LGBT Foundation meeting in Manchester and said, come on, put your case forward, they would shit themselves.
I've thrown down the gauntlet to gender critics. My DMs are open, my inbox is open, my whatever is open. If you want to come and discuss this with me in a fair and reasoned manner, I will happily have the debate with you, because any arguments they're putting forward, it's like,
there's another angle that I wanted to talk about, and I think it's an important one to do with misogyny. It's the fact that when TERFs attack us, it comes down mostly to the way we look. And when people have found pictures of me and they try and intimidate me by showing pictures of me when I was on the telly and stuff, and I've noticed that the attacks on you are doubly misogynistic because you are, you're bald, basically. I'm trying to think, there's no other way of putting it, is there?
No, there's no way of putting it.
That is a choice. You could wear wigs, you could probably get a really expensive wig, but you've made a choice to not conform to gender stereotypes, which is the thing they think they're criticising. But when it comes to you, all the nasty things that target the way you look come down to you looking like they try to dehumanize you and demonize you, don't they, based on that? And
I mean, this is a funny thing. It's like I treat it as a massive joke, because it's like I suffer from alopecia, and basically it happened. My body started rejecting my hair about 2018, 2019. And then just before lockdown in 2020, I shaved my head because I was getting lots of bald patches, and my hair never grew back. And it's a cosmic joke. It's like, for me, if you laugh with me with it, I will happily laugh along, because it's like literally my body yeeted my hair. However,
it's great that you can. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, it's like as with anything to do with bodies, human bodies are what they are, and alopecia is something where I understand why a lot of women are very self-conscious about it. I understand why a lot of women do wear wigs with it. I understand all of it. I understand why women feel very self-conscious about having no hair. With me, my skin's very sensitive, and even the slightest bit of if I wear my helmet, for instance, when I'm playing hockey, it can still leave red marks on my hair. So wearing a wig all day long just irritates my skin, and it's like, it's a personal choice to do this because I don't want to have my skin irritated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you're playing games, and it's a practical thing as well, isn't it? So
it is, and I think this is what people forget when it comes to womanhood. It's like, how do you want to construct being a woman? There's no one way of existing as a woman in the world. Everyone comes to womanhood in their own way.
Well, I was doing a little bit of reading about women with alopecia, and that is one of the things that they get if they choose not to wear wigs. It's they get called men, they get called masculine, and because we're so used to seeing women with long hair, It's to do with that secondary sex characteristic, isn't it? It's something that we just, because that's how we read people. And getting past that initial, I mean, I don't know if it's a shock, but, you know, for some people it is a shock, you know, to see a woman with no hair. I think it is. Because,
exactly.
You know, there's been women on the TV, you know, when they've, and the comments on the, you know, on social media are always really, you know, really childish, really. It's like the sort of conversation children might have when they're not being corrected. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't point at strangers and behave yourself in public. But TERFs haven't worked that out yet, have they?
Exactly. And I think it's very juvenile, because it's like, well, and so, I mean, anyone's welcome to come and look at the feed, my social media feed. But the attacks that I've been getting based on my looks, it's like, it's all rooted in their own personal biases, and it's not a reflection on me as myself. It's like, I'm comfortable in my own skin. This is something which I've existed with and lived with and having to come to terms with for the last 5 years. But it also means, and I'm funny enough doing a bit of writing about it this week, it's like people are bullies. Anonymity online, social media anonymity has given people the scope and the room to be absolute bullies to anybody who they feel as being different.
Well, that's true.
And at the moment you don't conform to expectations, it's like I'm a woman in my own skin. It's like I wear jeans and t-shirts and hoodies normally. That's because I like to be comfortable. And it is deeply ironic that gender critics will come out and say, "Oh, trans women are walking stereotypes. Look at you, you're acting like a prostitute." And it's like, actually,
the thing is, though, I do act like a prostitute sometimes, and I don't care.
Nothing wrong with that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it.
You know, it's like
that's the joy of being a woman, though.
It's like whenever I speak to, what strikes me all the time with the way social media is, it's like my lived experience in the real world with my colleagues and my family and my friends is if I never went online, I probably wouldn't notice transphobia. I mean, I have had people say things in the street and that, but it's very rare. And even if I look really different, and if I don't pass, whatever that fucking means, people are not rude. You know what I mean? People just are too busy. Women are too busy in real life to be fucking worrying about what I'm doing, or they should be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And I mean, I work at the University of Nottingham, and it's very telling that you walk into the building that I work in and no one cares. It's like, I might get the odd look about having no hair, but nobody makes any mention of me about my gender or my gender expression. It's like, I'm professional, I'm me, I'm not standing out.
Well, I think that's what TERFs don't want. They don't want you to be humanised, because once they see you as something that is not just a social media node, you know, like an account on social media, as like you're talking to me now as a human being. The trans bit is not actually important. It's important because of the way you're attacked. But in terms of your life, I may be just projecting here, but for me, my transness isn't really something I think about until it's used as a weapon against me. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
Exactly. It's the same with me. It's like I'm so long in the tooth with it. It's like I'm a woman with a trans history, not a trans woman, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah. That's a really good way of putting it, because obviously, like, some people in my family and stuff, they've asked me questions about it, and I think if they're good faith, you know, some people are just genuinely curious, aren't they? So
yeah, exactly. And I think this is where there's a difference between asking a question and then probing a way to weaponize the answer. And it's like, you see this a lot with other minority groups where they have exactly the same situation. I've got to be really careful whenever I'm around people who are not from my personal background. It's like I ask a lot of questions, not because I'm trying to be nasty, but because I'm a genuinely curious person. And there's a difference between curiosity and trying to use person's identity against them.
Well, you will have noticed all the attacks on what they call DEI recently, and it's a kind of an American import, isn't it? And it's like you've seen it. I've seen it in the Daily Mail recently since, and it's like, well, the reason we have diversity and inclusion and stuff is because we do need to educate. If you work in like a big company like the NHS, and you're going to meet people from all kinds of different backgrounds, aren't you? So it makes sense that if people have questions about those people, they should be able to present a seminar. It's as simple as that, isn't it? You know,
it is, and I think this is where it's funny, you put 10 trans people in the room and you're going to get 20 different understandings of transness, and that is a really good thing. You put one trans person in a room full of 50 cis people and you'll get 50 different understandings of that one trans person. And I think this is also where the danger lies, and I'm seeing this in social media discourse with post-Trump's election, with certain trans people standing up going, oh, I think we should moderate our tone, I think we should moderate...
Are you talking about Brianna Wu?
Amongst others. And
Brianna's... I was going to say, sorry to cut you in there, I've had a few bardies with Brianna Wu, but I think, when I think about it holistically, I think she's probably frightened. And a lot of trans people are frightened in America because what's happening there, you know, it's bloody it's awful. You know, there's no words for that. I cannot imagine how it must feel. I speak to American friends, and you know, they some people, unfortunately, they protect themselves by standing with the bully. I think that's what is happening, because if you stand back, but unfortunately you have to play the bully's game for the bully to accept you, and that's only going to work for so long, isn't it?
Exactly. I was in Chicago last September, and it was very telling. I was at a trans conference, I was presenting a paper, and Chicago, I had no issues in Chicago whatsoever. It was like literally downtown Chicago, just being myself. Went onto Northwestern's campus, and there's a really different vibe when you're in a trans space compared to when you're outside the trans space. And I think that trans people themselves, as I said about Brianna and a few others, is they are, because of their fear, they are driving themselves into the hands of their oppressor. You see it with Buck Angel, you see it with Blair White, you see it with Caitlyn Jenner. They're all the headline trans people. These are the famous trans people. These are the ones who are projecting themselves out into the world. They're essentially acting as pick-me's. And the moment you call them out for it, it's the moment they turtle up and go, and then they start attacking the trans community. You see it with women's rights as well, with people, a lot of the women who are anti-abortion pretty much are the same. You look at their rhetoric, you look at their desire for attention, and it is just leading into a very dark place. And when we talk about social media, I mean, I've been on social media since 1997 with MySpace and GeoCities.
Oh my god!
I'm long enough in the tooth with it. Sorry. And I think this is where the problem lies. Was what do we want from social media? Do we want it to be a forum where anyone can say anything, or are we just simply creating echo chambers, which are, especially with trans people, where you're leading to these really horrific conversations where you don't know who's real, you don't know who's a bot, you don't know if they're just... If at the moment you post anything trans-related, you get 50, 100 responses. And is that an astroturfed response, or is it someone genuinely sitting behind a keyboard spouting hate at you?
Yeah, I mean, I was saying this. You don't need bots if there are enough people willing to fall in line and, you know, be monetized. Because one of the issues I have with the free speech argument is, okay, anybody's allowed to be an idiot on the internet, right? I don't believe in sending people to prison for something they've said on the internet. But if you're monetizing that, if you're making money from that, if you're influencing others. If you've got, you know, that's not free speech. That's amplified speech, you know. And I think that's something. I mean, I don't know what's happening with the online safety bill. I was like, everything seems to like come into the media and then get suppressed. But I was reading about, do you know, Esther Jai?
Yes.
Because they're trying to, you know, they want to make internet safer for children. They go with the children angle, and I can understand why they do that. But it's not just children, is it? Because there's a lot of vulnerable people on the internet. We use children as a metaphor, I think, for our own infantilization. Because when we indulge in these arguments, we are actually, you know, we're complicit in it in a sense. Because I'm guilty of that. You know, arguing for hours with somebody on a Friday night when I've had too many wines. You know what I mean? And I was like, why am I doing this?
Oh, I feel the same. It's why I'm very careful not to argue with anybody I don't know.
You're very polite, I've noticed, yeah.
It's more I try to be professional. I've got my name and I've got my workspace on there. So my employers have seen my social media account, so I have to be scrupulous on it.
I've got to say, I think, when I read your comments, you're very measured. I'll put it that way. Whereas I can be a bit venomous, so I've got to be careful.
Oh, I can be very biting when I want to be, but it's also I find kill them with kindness is my approach, because what's the worst they can do if you're kind to them and just state something and then they go off on one at you, it's like, well, it's their problem, not yours.
I mean, if you showed somebody this stuff, like when I've spoke to people that they're not on Twitter, they're like just family members, and they when I mention like what J.K. Rowling's doing, what J.K. the Harry Potter writer, what's she doing that for? And it's like they can't compute it. It's like, no, she lives on social media now doing this. It's like I think that's why not enough people notice transphobia, because sometimes the dog whistles are unheard because they're not recognised. It's like I call transphobia the prejudice of least resistance, because it's the one where people can get into quite easily, incrementally, through these arguments about sports. So they think they may have a point about sports, which you could argue there is a discussion to be had about fairness, but they get radicalised along that line. So it's only a few incremental steps then before they're calling you a pervert, and I've seen that happen in real time.
It happens like literally. I'm looking at my inbox at the moment, and it's happening. It's happening right now.
So I mean, it had reached a point with you. I mean, I want to talk about your GoFundMe. I best bring that up because that's really important. Actually, can we talk about? So you is this your case against England hockey?
That's correct, yes. Basically, me and two others who wish to remain anonymous have launched a legal challenge to England hockey's new trans policy, which is due to come into force in September. Basically, England hockey are stating that the only people who can play women's hockey are women assigned female at birth, or rather people assigned female at birth. And any non-binary people who take testosterone and trans women will have to play in a new open category, which is basically trans women, non-binary people taking testosterone, and men. Right.
So, I mean, where does that decision come from? Because, I can't imagine there are many trans or non-binary people that this is going to... You know what I mean? It's like when I look at the numbers, I think, well, why has this come to the table? And I'm always cynically thinking, have they taken some money from somebody, or?
I am going to have to swerve that question.
Okay, fair enough.
For legal reasons, I can't say too much about my personal opinions on this.
No, that's just, sorry about that. No, that's just me being cynical.
I was just going to give you the answer I can give you, and what I think has been happening more broadly about women's sports. And actually, interestingly, England, the FA, the English FA, haven't done this. Is that under the Gender Recognition Act, you've got sex-affected activities, and that is open to wide interpretation. It's been left down to the governing bodies to do that. And I think what has happened behind the scenes is that since the trans inclusive policy came in place about 12 years ago, there's been a drip feeding of voices, and at the club level nobody's been asking for this. So it has been a top-down approach to it, and
usually is.
And it's funny that hockey is quite a marginal sport, even in the UK. It's very much a mixed sex sport. There are more men playing it than women, and it's telling that if this had happened in football, there'd be a massive uproar for this. If you had people like Blair Hamilton, who was castigated for playing for a women's football team, and she's facing a lot of abuse for doing that. Yet me, and I've been banging on about this for the last 8 years since I started coming back to playing hockey. I put my details out there on social media. I said, look, I've been doing this. I wrote about it publicly 2 years ago in a blog, publicly put it all out there, which the Daily Mail picked up on. And it's interesting that I've never hidden this. This isn't something which I have shied away from. I don't out myself publicly normally. I don't make a big deal out of my transness, but at the same time, I'm not ashamed of being myself. And if people want to have a problem with me, it's their problem, not mine. And I think that is what has essentially happened with hockey, is a few people somewhere along the line have had an issue with it without doing any consultations, without actually doing any empirical research. into trans people playing hockey, they've suddenly decided, okay, we're just going to ban all trans women and non-binary people who've taken testosterone from playing women's hockey, and it feels marginal.
Well, the thing with the sports argument, I mean, there was the story about the two pool players that was in the news this week. And obviously people say, well, what people who would, like, I think it was Piers Morgan, there was some journalists who basically say, well, why are we talking about this? Because there's no strength difference in pool, but they always try and make an argument that there is. But I think the turf argument basically is that you're taking a woman's place. Like, it's not even about fairness in terms of physicality or physiology. It's about the fact that you're taking a women's medal, or the inference is that you're cheating. You know, that is. Yeah. But people like you don't get into sports like this to cheat, because if you did, you wouldn't be dedicated to it. You know, you know, the idea that somebody would just get into a sport because, like, say, pool, because they wanted to win, and that was it. You know, that there's no competition. If there is no competition, there is no sport.
Exactly. I think this is where it gets complicated, because on the one hand, I don't know if you saw the court case that Harriet Pincher was involved in, the pool player who was actually ironically called out the weekend. She's actually taken one of the pool authorities to court over her blocking from playing the sport.
Right.
So her case is a bleeding edge case on it. But I started doing this yesterday, where I was basically going, trans women are women, they're not stealing places, we belong in the sport. It's a erroneous argument to state that trans women are men. If trans women are women, they are not stealing women's places, they belong in the sport. And ultimately, like me playing hockey, I'm a goalkeeper, and it's like, you don't put on those pads if you want to cheat. Trust me, you stand in front of a hockey player who's hitting a ball at you at 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, you're not doing that for fun. Well, you are doing it for fun, but you're not doing it. It takes a lot of time to train, and it takes a lot of time to learn how to play the sport.
I think that is why a lot of, sport is a very human thing, isn't it? It's about striving, being something better than the sum of your parts, and it's a very much a social and mental well-being thing. I think this is why it upset me so much when they were going for park run, because a lot of those people are doing it for mental health reasons. They're not doing it because they want to be an Olympic runner, or they think they can be an athlete. They're doing it because the doctors recommended it. The doctors actually said, maybe this could be a way out of your depression, or this could help you holistically, and they go for that. And that, oh my god, it's so terrible the way that they target people, because that really could push somebody over the edge. I mean, I'm pretty strong, but some of the things I've had directed at me when I've been feeling low, I think that could really push somebody over the edge. They don't seem to understand that this is not about sport. It's about, if there is a sport, the sport is driving trans women off social media. That seems to be their bloody sport.
Exactly. And I mean, Mari Yamaguchi is a classic one with park run. It's like she'll yammer on she'll yammer on about trans women in park runs, and it's like,
well, she collects the data every Sunday, doesn't she? And she goes through it with her.
She's obsessed. But the point is, and I put this underneath every time she posts about it, so I just simply put fun run. They are fun runs. They're not competitive. It's you're running against yourself, and it's like, trans people are not the threat to women's sport. It's the lack of funding, lack of coaching, lack of opportunities, etc.
What I've also noticed is the people most vocal about it, who perhaps had a history of sport, it's like 25 years since they ever had any competition, like Sharon Davis, they basically work for lobby groups. They're not involved in any sporting bodies. They're not invited to any meetings about the inclusion of women and girls in sport. They're invited to Tufton Street, literally.
Exactly.
So for those who don't know, Tufton Street is like a back street in Westminster where all the lobby groups meet. But that's what the aim is, not to uplift women or to encourage girls, or to give any sense that they're fighting misogyny. The whole argument is about excluding a few trans women or non-binary people.
Precisely, and I think this is why you look at people like Martina Navratilova as a prime example of this, because there was a massive headline splash across the Sun and Daily Mirror back in the 80s saying Martina Navratilova is turning all the female tennis players lesbian.
Yeah, I saw that.
And she was attacked virulently for being a lesbian in tennis back in the day. And she's now she's now anti-trans. She's an absolute gender critic, and it's just telling how the same rhetoric used against her she's turned on trans people.
I don't know if some of them do it for the money, or obviously they might have an inner prejudice, and that becomes, they become a bit radicalised. But I think, I always say to them, there are no prizes for women at the end of the gender critical movement. That's not what you're in it for. Because, like, any women's organisations, anything, even if it's to do with domestic violence, if it's to do with women in prisons, they're not listening to them, because they know that the actual issues on the ground are not trans people. There's a list of 10 other things above that they need to solve.
Yes, and I think this is also, the prize at the end of the gender critical pot of gold is book deals, it's television appearances, it's kudos, it's fame.
I don't know if you're familiar with Douglas Adams, but it always reminds me of the bit in where they build the supercomputer to find out the answer to life, the universe, and everything. Well, to me, that question is, what is a woman? And the computer says 42, meaning that they don't understand the question, but they can make a lot of money arguing with each other on chat shows, and that's the point.
Exactly. And what was telling, there was a book, the Oxford Literary Festival, which was just held last week. You had Helen Joyce and Julie Bindel on stage together talking about trans issues.
Yeah, exactly.
And
they always try to say, she tried to say in that thread that we've tried to debate trans people and it never works out. No, you've not, because there are no gender critical academics. That's not a thing. The nearest they had to that was Kathleen Stock, and she had to leave her job to become a TERF, basically. So there's no actual... Like the people that write about gender, the people that write about sociology in terms of trans people, they're not going to sit in a room with people like Helen Joyce who have no provenance. She has no. The only expert they have is somebody like Helen Joyce, who's an expert in her own prejudice. Anyway.
And even then, the Australian courts basically slammed her and said, "You're not an expert in any of this. We don't accept your evidence."
They try to be expert witnesses in things and stuff like that. The whole sorry to go on about this, but the gender critical points that they bring to court are basically try and find a loophole in the law. That's what they try to do. So they'll go through the law and say, how can we exclude a trans woman in this instance? And they'll try and find something, a way of wording it. It's pernicious, but it doesn't actually benefit any women, does it?
And the irony is when Maya Forstadter's case, the decision in that case basically said they had to go to court to be declared gender critical believers. So their beliefs have been protected at law.
Yeah,
and it's like it's deeply ironic.
Fascism is a protected belief. I don't want to hear it in the workplace. Do you know what I mean?
I love it. Yes, precisely. And
if somebody at my job started coming up to me and saying, "You know what? I'm really, really into I don't know. Just think of something. I'm really into golf. Will you come to golf with me? We come to," and they never shut up about golf. I'd have to say, "Look, I believe you. You love golf, but please, it doesn't matter why you're haranguing somebody in the workplace, which Mayor Forstater was doing. It's to do with the fact you're stopping somebody doing their job."
The thing with Maya Forstater that everyone forgets is that she actually wasn't. It wasn't explicitly in her workplace. It was through Facebook posts.
Yeah.
She was posting virulently transphobic Facebook content, and she was discovered to have done it. Her employers didn't agree with it. They said
she was following a page on Twitter called Troony Troons, and what Troony Troons do was find images of shonky looking cross-dressers and fetishistic images, and they put it all together in a sort of scrapbook. And she was following this porn. I mean, why, Mayor Forstater, are you following cross-dressing porn on Twitter? You weirdo. And it's no surprise that Helen Joyce gets caught looking at Harry Potter fan fiction porn on public transport on the way between Oxford and London.
Exactly, and I find it deeply ironic that they have a go at trans women being fetishists, porn addicted and porn addled, when it's actually gender critics who are obsessed with trans bodies.
Well, they are absolutely obsessed.
The comments they come out with.
Yeah. I mean, sorry to keep interrupting you, but I'm a bit animated on this subject because I a couple of years ago I had like an OnlyFans account, and people just ripped the pictures from it, and I was like, well, that is legal. I could do something like, what happened with Narinda, like where Lawrence Fox is basically showing photos of her getting out of a taxi, and they were like upskirt shots. That's why he's being charged with sex offences. That's what TERFs do all day, isn't it? That's what all these little trolls do all day.
Exactly, and I think this is a deeply offensive thing when they start coming after trans women. It's like I since 2016 I have pretty much scrubbed my social media presence of all but a handful of pictures, and the pictures that they've scraped of me have come from my LinkedIn profile picture, a picture on social media from the University Women's Instagram account, Hockey's Women's Instagram account, which is just a team photograph, and my work picture. They don't have access to any pictures of me without my hair post 2020 because I haven't posted them because I'm paranoid that people are going to weaponize my looks.
Well, I've got to that point where I don't actually care what's out there anymore, because once something's online, it's impossible to bring it back. So I just got to deal with that. But I think I've become somewhat desensitized to it.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a great tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, like when somebody wants to find like a pre-transition picture of me now, I'm like, well, so what? I'm happier now. Well, you can see in my eyes that I look sad then. Thank you.
Exactly. Well, I'm very lucky that there's not a single picture of me pre-transition on the internet, because the internet didn't exist before I transitioned.
Well, yeah, you said you were. It's interesting you mentioned the early internet, because I was on the internet pretty early because my dad was into computers and stuff, and I remember there was all this hope for it's the democratization of opinion, and everybody will be able to, with the end of party politics, and it's gone the absolute opposite way, like where there's a billionaire that owns, one of the biggest platforms in the world and can manipulate it to his own ends. You couldn't make it up. Talk about Orwellian.
Exactly. Yeah. Precisely, and you see this all the time. It's like when they talk about cisgender on Twitter. If you put the word CIS onto Twitter, cis on Twitter, it will block your tweet for being a hate crime.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is. I mean, there's plenty of workarounds with it. You just put cis apostrophe s, etc. But it just shows the depths to which gender critical beliefs and values have been absorbed into the world, and how gender critics have influenced language, have influenced society. They accuse trans people of going, and there's a meme that someone posted of an anti-trans meme someone posted of a rainbow-haired individual in the middle of a crowd of people saying, "I want you to reorganize society just to justify my beliefs." Gender critics are accusing trans people of doing the same tactics that they themselves are using. Society up until 2017, 2018 was very much trans inclusive. It was trans people could just get on with their lives.
Well, Trump. I think we're going to have to, have some science behind, because obviously, if there are more trans women coming through, and it does seem like that's going to be a realistic thing, because more and more people come out, they want to play sports. So I think that we should be aiming to include, not exclude. That should be the goal. It should be, sport is supposed to be like to make us more than human. Do you know what I mean? like that's the thing. It's about, like I said before, it's about the idea of striving to be the best person you can be in a particular thing. Now, if there is real disparity, if somebody is definitely stronger than another, then you don't even have a game. It's like it cancels itself out if you've got some massive super strong trans woman and she's in a game with a dainty young thing, and obviously that will cancel itself out.
Exactly. I think there's a very famous picture of female Olympians taken in the 2008 Olympics, where they lined up 20 female athletes from the shortest to the tallest, and you've got female gymnasts who are like 4'11" on one end, and then you've got a 6'8" female basketballer on the other. And in between are a whole range of body shapes and sizes, and it just shows that women's bodies and women's competitive abilities are as broad as all women's bodies are, and 95% of trans women fit within that range. And it is telling that the misogynistic framing of women, especially when it comes to sports, is being justified by a misunderstanding of women. Because women are not universal.
It plays into the misogyny also that men are protectors of women, or that women need men to show them the way of strength. It's like, no, I mean, there's different types of strength. There's endurance, there's brute, muscle mass and all that. I mean, when I've looked at individual sports, when I've been writing about this, I thought, well, each individual case is unique. There's not one trans sports person. If you're playing pool, it's not the same as playing javelin. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so I don't know. I mean, I feel like I didn't know enough about the science behind all this to be able to argue it, but I've discovered that they're not even interested in that anyway.
No, there's never been, and this is a problem with trying to look at the empirical evidence, because I went looking for it last year just out of curiosity. And there has not been one single empirical study comparing trans female athletes with cis female athletes. All of the studies have been done using male bodies compared to female bodies. And you look at the evidence that is presented, and it's like, well, no, trans women are not men. Biochemically, they're different. Physiologically, they are different. What differences there are do impact on how trans women compete in sport. There have been some studies using trans women individually and within small cohort studies, but there's been no large empirical research.
I'm just looking at a video at the moment, and it's Julia Hartley-Brewer. I mean, come on, Julia. They always have someone on that absolutely knows nothing about the subject. It just happens to be somebody that's willing to embarrass themselves for 5 minutes, and in this case it was Jean Hatchett.
Yeah, Jean Hatchett is another example of somebody who is trying to be a professional TERF, who has nothing better to do with her time. And again, I've crossed paths with Jean quite a lot, and it's very telling that you put forward a lucid argument against them, you use a lucid rebuttal. They're not interested in you coming back with a rational response. They just want to treat you as somebody who's irrational and somebody who they can just dismiss with a wave of a hand.
I think for the casual viewer, though, I think they just enjoyed the farce of it, the sort of comedy, because there is something ridiculous about the whole argument, isn't there? And it's not really it's not really something if you did want to think about it, you'd have to go through quite a lot of layers of understanding. So when something's presented as, oh, something's taking over, it's like trans women are coming over on small boats, turn your kins as a non-binary climate activist. That's basically Talktv every day.
Exactly.
There's always an invasion, isn't there? Like, oh, something's taking over, we've got to stop it.
Yes, exactly. And I think this is why we need to be very careful not to, as the trans community, inverted commas for what it is not to get too defensive about this, because the moment you get too defensive is you end up with splinters like Buck, like Blair, like Brianna. Is that they're the ones who've got the money, the pedigree, the contacts, the publicity to basically push anybody they don't agree with under the bus. And it's I mean, I'm an academic. I can talk about this till the cows come home. I can get paid to do this till the cows come home.
But they don't want academics, do they, on these kind of shows? They want somebody that's going to get... Because I've been on Talktv and I've been on GBnews, but my attitude is I want to break the echo chamber. I'm not going to argue about the thing that I'm going to say, why are you talking about this now? Why are Tories suddenly interested in sport and fairness? You know what I mean? Why are Tories suddenly interested in the welfare of women in prison? It didn't happen before.
Exactly.
I mean, I think they should be thanking all the trans women for bringing attention to women's sports, because nobody was talking about women's sports a few years ago, ever. Even when the Lionesses won, it wasn't a massive... I mean, it was in the paper for a couple of days, but what the big story was Luis Rubiales planning an unwanted kiss and grabbing his crotch all over the place, and none of them were talking about that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is why women's sport has been horrifically unequal to male sports. If gender critics had any nous about them, they would be pointing out the inequality in funding, the inequality in access, the fact that girls are not being encouraged to play sport in their teams.
that's a really important thing, isn't it? Because like when I have looked at websites dedicated to, you know, funding and helping girls get into sports, none of them are talking about trans people. They're talking about the fact that there's institutional and systemic misogyny that stops girls achieving, because at some stage, if you're a brilliant girl, you will have to play with boys in certain sports because there's just not enough girls for you to play with. So when I was at school, I got made to play football whether I was any good or not. The girls never had that opportunity. There were probably girls at my school that would have been really good footballers, but they were never even approached. Whereas I was forced to go out there in the rain and look miserable and be made to be the goalkeeper because I couldn't do anything else. You know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is where having a conversation is different from having a debate as well. Because having a conversation means you can talk about the issues. Having a debate means you've got an antagonistic approach to it.
Well, there's got to be a sort of adversarial element, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think this is where the danger lies in trying to treat trans women as trans identities in particular as a room for debate. Well, they're not up for debate. Trans people understand who they are. We've existed since recorded history, since human history began. There's always been trans people.
It's just the way we talk about it that changes. That's all. Exactly. I've always said, like in every culture, in every part of the world, there's this thing called transgender with different names. And in countries where it's not accepted, in countries where there's more misogyny, those people don't stop existing. They just hide or emigrate, and that's why they come here. You know, it's like, you know what I mean?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I'm going to say thank you, Rachel, for talking to me. It's been amazing. Like I said, I thank you for all your activism and what you do. I think you're really, a really strong advocate. So,
thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure as well. I've followed you from afar for a while, so it's lovely chatting with you.
Well, I try and do these and try and put some positive messages out there for other trans people to listen to. And, I just think it matters that people hear us speak on a human level, because obviously, for a lot of people, the only time they hear our voices is when we're angry on the internet.
Exactly.
When we're angry on Twitter. Decaffeinate us. Anyway, okay. Well, I'll stop the recording now. I'll edit that last bit so it sort of wraps up a bit better. But
yeah.